The new Studio One Pro 8 is here, except, well, it isn't because it's not called that anymore. More on that later. Now, I've just been using it only for the last couple of days, actually, while I've had man flu, as you may be able to hear. So I'm just going to briefly go through what I've discovered so far, as long as my voice holds up. But first, this video is sponsored by DistroKid. Follow the VIP link in the description down below to get 7% off an already amazing price to distribute your music to the world. What you're looking at here is not the new version of Studio One. Now, bear with me for a moment. There's a reason why I'm showing you this product. It's called Fender Studio. It was released back in 2024, and it's essentially a very simple DAW, probably aimed at guitarists who want to get some ideas down quickly and don't want to bother too much with a full production. But it's important because it was actually developed by the Studio One team. Now that makes a lot of sense because Fender owned PreSonus, who created Studio One. Now that becomes important because it seems that what they've done with this new version of Studio One is take some of the ideas and features that they developed in Fender Studio and they've brought them across to this new version 8. And in the meantime, they've also gone ahead and renamed the product completely. So it's no longer called Studio One, it's called Fender Studio Pro 8. Now, it probably makes a lot of sense in that case for me to talk about some of those features that they brought across first. So it's probably no surprise, given Fender's heritage, that there's some guitar-centric features included. And these particularly come in the form of two new amp sim plugins. One's called Mustang Native, that's for electric guitar, and the other one is called Rumble Native for bass guitar. Now, the first thing I was pleased about was that although I am a fan of Fender amps, there's more than just Fender amps and cabinets included. There's some which obviously come from other brands as well, and there's also a whole bunch of stomp boxes included. It's a lot to show you in one demonstration, so what I've done is I've just applied one of these to a clean electric guitar in my demo, one to an overdriven lead guitar, and one to a bass guitar part. It's a very simple kind of rough demo, but it should give you a sense of the quality, even though I can't show you sort of every single amp involved. While we're having a listen, let's have a look at the interface so you can get a sense of what's included. Now, one of the sounds you were hearing there on the lead guitar was not coming from the amp sim. I'm talking about the reverb. I use this new plugin called Studio Verb for that. Now, this has been moved across from Fender Studio that we talked about earlier, and arguably, I guess we could say that Studio One, I can't call it that, didn't need another reverb plugin. It already has some good ones, but I think they probably moved this across to create some compatibility between Fender Studio projects and Fender Studio Pro 8 projects. I'm guessing that. Now, I think it did a great job of just creating a much bigger sound. Previously, the lead guitar was sounding like this with just a little bit of delay. And then with this reverb, and if you make sure that this track is in stereo mode, you can see over here that although this is a mono recording, I've changed the format to stereo. Then you can get really nice width on there as well. Have a listen to this. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the controls here. I think they're fairly straightforward. And like I say, although we probably didn't need another reverb in this new version, I do think it's a good one at least, and I found that I got the results that I wanted from it really, really quickly. Now, one of the things I've seen many people ask about over the years is how to convert an audio track into MIDI in Studio One. And I've seen a number of different workarounds, including using third-party plugins such as Melodyne. So I'm very pleased to see that there is a feature included in the new Fender Studio Pro 8 which attempts to do this, and I think it does a pretty good job. Now, if you remember in my little demo, I had these keys playing. They sounded like this. So polyphonic key sound, but what if I wanted to change the sound? Well, it's useful if I convert this to MIDI. So what I'm going to do is just right click on this and then click on this extract notes feature. It's in my recent items because I've recently used it, and I'll go ahead and let it do its AI wizardry. Now, I wouldn't say this is super fast. It probably takes, I don't know, a minute or so, but let's speed up the video and see what it comes up with. So you can see here that what it's done is it's created a new track just below the track that we did the extraction from, and you can see the MIDI notes have been extracted there, and it seems to just create a default instrument using MIDI just so that we can sort of preview those chords. And let's just have a listen to what it's done. So it appears to have extracted all the notes from that performance, but of course the sound is not the sound that I'd be looking for. But all you need to do then is just grab that MIDI and then drag it down onto a virtual instrument of your choice. So I've got it applied to this Wurlitzer sound here. We'll just have a quick listen. Now, from using this just a few times, all I can tell you is it's not absolutely perfect. It seems to get the notes right, but the velocities are a little bit off here and there. I guess that's not too bad a result, but at least it does attempt to make some velocity settings for each note. It's not just extracting the notes. So I would feel here that in most cases, it's at least going to get you kind of 98% there, and you may have to go through and do some tidying up, which is still a massive time saver. Now, you may want to do a similar thing but with drums. The drums in my demo were actually made up of some drum loops which come with the DAW. You can see them on the browser on the right hand side there, but of course they're not very flexible in terms of really changing the performance, changing the sounds of the drums, etc. So this is a point where you may want to convert this audio again into MIDI to use it with your favorite drum plugin. So again, I'm just going to right click on the audio here, and then I'm going to go down to extract drums, which is in my recent items list, and let it do its wizardry, and I'll come back to you after it's done it. So just like before, when it's finished, it creates a new track. You can see it here, and then it applies the extracted MIDI data to a default sound in Impact in this case. And we can then audition it and have a listen to it like so. Okay, so it's done that basic job, but of course it's not really the sort of sound that I'm looking for. So again, I can just drag this onto my actual drum plugin. I'll just do that now like so. I'm using Addictive Drums in this case. Now, one important thing to remember is that it seems to extract drums to general MIDI mapping. So you may want to go into your drum plugin and just make sure in the mapping section that it is actually using general MIDI like I have here. So let's go ahead and have a listen to that now. Now again, just like before, I would say that the results are not perfect, but they're sort of pretty good, and you just have to go through there and tidy up a few things here and there. Again, mostly, in my opinion, related to velocity. Now, one of the most challenging things when you create a new project and you're going to record your first track is this sound. The cold, heartless, mechanical dirge, if that's a word, of the metronome. So what a lot of us do is actually create some temporary drum tracks just to play along with, just to give us a bit more feel. Well, you may not have to do that anymore, because now included with the metronome feature is the ability to use drum sounds. I can just long press on it down here and change this from click to drums, and now when I click play with the metronome switched on, I'm going to hear this. Much better than a metronome. Now, if you go ahead, long press on this again and go up to metronome setup, then you can see down here in this drum section that there's a whole bunch of different styles for you to choose from in different genres. And this may well give you a really great starting point and just give you a nicer feel when you open up that blank project. Now, you may notice in my demo project here that with my bass guitar track, I've got 4 plugins inserted. Now, with previous versions, I would open one of those plugins by double clicking on it, but now that click behavior has changed. So just single clicking on a plugin now opens it. Now I could pin it like so, and then I could open one of the other plugins like so by single clicking on it, and then I'd get both at once. If I wanted to open all 4 like that so I can see them all at the same time, that's how I do it normally. It's a little bit cumbersome, but you can also decide to flick between these plugins just by using the tab at the top of one of the windows that you've already opened, but that way you can't see them all at the same time. So in this version, they've overcome that with a new feature called the channel overview feature, and you get to that by double clicking on the track itself, and you can see it's appeared here. Now you can see all 4 of my plugins are represented here with these 4 panels. I've got all of the controls accessible to me right away without having to flick between each of them. Now for native plugins, of course, you get a slightly more sophisticated view. This Pro EQ plugin included with Fender Studio Pro 8, of course, has its controls, or many of its controls there ready for me to use. However, with third-party plugins, you're sort of stuck with buttons and knobs, but it does a very good job of creating the right buttons and knobs. I didn't set these up at all. These were done by default. It figured that out for me already. Now, in some cases, you may not get all of the buttons you need. For example, with this Pro Q4 plugin, there's many controls, and it's only started us off with a few of them. But you can go in and edit this. So if I go here and click on this little arrow and go down to Set Up Edit Parameters, you can see I can grab any of the controls from the plugin and add them over to my panel here in the channel overview. I think this is a really good workflow bonus. It sort of on the fly creates a channel strip and enables you to quickly say make some adjustments to your compressor, then to your EQ, without having to continually open and close various different plugins. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. One of the features that's been around in Studio One for a while now is the chord track. You can see I've got it open here at the top of my project, and if I wanted to add in some new chords, I could do it manually. So I'll double click on the first bar here. It adds in a C chord by default, and if I double click on that, it opens up the chord selector, and I can go ahead and select whichever chord I wish to insert there. Now, another thing that we can now do is sort of more automatically add chords, and the first way that we're going to do that is by opening up the inspector while we've got the chord track selected. So I'll press F4 to do that, and here we can choose chord progression presets. I'm going to click on plus here. You can see a whole bunch listed here. They're divided into major and minor groups, and I'll just go ahead and randomly select one of the major chord progressions. So I'll click on that, and you can see that it's inserted that at the top here. Now, another thing I can do to sort of automatically select chords is to use the new chord assistant feature. So if I hover over one of these chords and go to the arrow here, I'll click on that, and you can see it suggests some chords that I could use here given the context of the progression so far. You can also get to this by double clicking on the chord again like so to open up the chord selector, and you can toggle the suggestions here on and off by clicking on this button over here. So now, once we've set up our chord progression, of course, we can select all of those chords, we can drag them down onto an instrument like so, and we can go ahead and audition that chord progression like so. So I would say that if you're just kind of running out of ideas, looking for inspiration, both of these methods could be quite useful at times. Now, if you're really familiar with Studio One, then you probably have noticed that there's been some sort of subtle and maybe not so subtle UI changes with the new Fender Studio Pro 8. We've got things like in the bottom right-hand corner, rather than the words for the different views here, we've just got icons. So rather than seeing browse now, we click on the browse icon to open up the browser like so. We've got an additional one here, of course, now, and that's the channel overview one. So if we click that, we can open the channel overview for the currently selected track as well. And you may have noticed also some things like the track list and the inspector have moved from the top down to the bottom left hand corner now. The shortcuts, of course, are still the same. And you may also notice that with the stock plugins, the knobs have a slightly different look to them, and there's a little bit of rebranding. They're essentially the same, however. But one of the new UI features that I kind of like is something called the Arranger overview. You get to it by clicking on this icon at the top here, and when you get this, kind of open this, you get the kind of map at the top here of the project. You can collapse it or expand it like so, and you can see that it's got this, area where it's showing where you're currently zoomed in. And if you drag that around, of course, you can easily scroll through your project, or you can sort of expand the actual sort of zoom of your view by using each end of this interface like so. I think it's a nice addition. I can see that they've borrowed it from Fender Studio. It's a simple thing, but I can see it being quite useful, especially for navigating more complex projects. Now, something definitely borrowed from Fender Studio is a feature called Jam Now. And I think a lot of you are going to find this fun. Whether you'll use it productively or not, I don't know. But you get to it by clicking on the new project button here at the start page. And you can see at the bottom here, we've got the Jam Now feature. Now, there's a whole bunch of basically jam tracks to choose from. You can preview them, so you can just click on the play button like so. And, I've downloaded a few here. There's a few at the bottom you can see I haven't downloaded, but it actually is very quick at downloading these tracks. So if I go ahead and choose, say, this one here, Jump Up, I'll select that. I'll click on OK. It creates this new project with all of the tracks in there for the jam track, and I can go ahead and play it like so. And you get some pretty sophisticated backing tracks out of this, which of course you can go ahead and you can do things like sort of mix each of these tracks, etc. So, as I say, I think a lot of fun. Good to see it here. Now, there's been quite a few other minor updates that I've neither got the time or the voice for in this video, and there's especially been quite a few updates to both the Impact and Sample One sampler plugins that come with Fender Studio Pro 8. If you'd like me to make a video about those plugins in a little bit more detail in terms of the changes, let me know in the comments down below. Now, overall, I'm pretty pleased with this release. I like the fact that it focuses on the kind of core features of the DAW rather than sort of extra pages and things, which I feel have dominated previous releases. So it's nice to get focus on everyday features you might be using. Of course, there's always going to be some that you wish were there or had been improved and you feel like you've been waiting for ages, which haven't been included in this release. You might want to let me know down below about that. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with the focus of it. I'm less, or I should say I'm more skeptical about the name change. I think it just creates a little bit of confusion. I'm not sure if it's all that helpful. Makes sense given the ownership of the company, but yeah, means people like me are going to have to think, do I have to change my channel name now or my Facebook group names? Link for that in the description down below, by the way. Or are you all going to continue to call it Studio One? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching today. I'm Mike. I hope you're well, and I'll see you in the next video.